South Carolina, the Palmetto State. It's home to classic Southern charm, shrimp and grits, and intense college football rivalries. But it's also home to some pretty high-end cities too. That's right, South Carolina has some pretty fancy areas. You may not have even known that, but it's true. But as we'll see, the richest cities in South Carolina don't really make that much money, because it's South Carolina. Today we're going to explore the richest cities in South Carolina. Some of these places are out of your budget, but all of these places are all very nice and safe. If you're thinking about moving to South Carolina and you want to live in any of these cities we'll talk about, you'd better be able to bring home the dough though. Kinda. I mean, depending on where you live, some of the cities are actually pretty affordable. Some of the cities are pretty expensive too. Hello. Dashing. I know. So how do you look at the wealthiest cities in a state? Well, I took every single city in South Carolina that has more than 5,000 people, and I looked at how much money everybody makes and how much their homes are worth. Then I assigned a score to every single city. Some of these places will be kind of a surprise, and you've heard of many of them. Here are the wealthiest cities in South Carolina. If you are so rich, if you aren't so rich, if you're just an average family guy, you can live right here, you can move right in with the place that's tucked into the pines. We're going to begin our tour of the richest cities in South Carolina in a city right in the center of the state. This is Forest Acres, a suburb of the capital, Columbia. There's about 10,000 people here. You'll find a bunch of parks, highly ranked schools, and plenty of successful families too. Folks in town say the community is tight-knit and also full of friendly young professionals and retirees. Plus, Forest Acres is only a short distance away from lots of jobs and things to do in downtown Columbia, the state capital. The average household in Forest Acres brings in about $70,000 a year. The poverty rate's below 10% and the unemployment rate's only 4%. While the folks here might not exactly be rolling in the dough, they are living very comfortably and easy. Because, in case you didn't know, it's not as expensive to live in South Carolina as it is in other states, especially in the center part of the state. Now that might change as more and more people move here though. In case you didn't know, South Carolina is the 5th fastest growing state in the nation right now. All those people fleeing from the Northeast want warmth and a cheaper lifestyle. And you can sure get that here, pal. The average home in Forest Acres is about $267,000. That's cheap, everyone. Our next stop on our rich tour of South Carolina brings us to the coast for the first time. This is Hanahan. Most of the wealth in South Carolina is going to be along the coast or in what's referred to as upstate. We'll get there later. Hanahan is a small town feel just north of the much larger city of Charleston. People tend to agree that life moves just a little slower in Hanahan. Literally. Speed limits are well enforced around here to make sure the town is safe for everybody. In this quiet town of 24,000 people, the median income is about the same as Forest Acres at about $70,000. The unemployment rate's a low 4%. Home prices here are about $332,000, which is still really low for living near the coast. I'm sure people in Hanahan love being close to all the attractions that coastal South Carolina has to offer, while still being able to afford a peaceful, normal daily life. Lucky duckies in Hanahan. For the first time, we're heading to upstate South Carolina. This is the area at the top of the state near the North Carolina and Georgia borders. It's a great place to live, this whole area. In South Carolina, pretty much anywhere up here or along the coast is just so nice. It's the central part of the state that's bad. Simpsonville's just south of Greenville, which is also an amazing place to live. I once called Greenville the best small town in America. Simpsonville's a short drive from Greenville, and it's close to national forests and mountain views and waterfall hikes. It's a pretty desirable place to live. But the residents are also financially well off. Well, for South Carolina they are. They make about $72,000 a year. You're probably like, 72 grand for mom and dad? Yeah, that's how cheap it is in South Carolina, people. I mean, the 22,000 people in Simpsonville aren't spending lavishly. They're just financially stable. The average house here is about $310,000. For our next stop, we're going to go back to the middle of the state to another Columbia burb. This is Lexington, which is just south of the state capital. It might not be as ritzy as you might think, but again, residents here live comfortably and have a wealth of disposable income. The average home brings in about $73,000. That's doable, right, everyone? I mean, you and your spouse are probably making that now. See how cheaply you can live here in South Carolina? I mean, the average home price here is $250,000. That's cheap, right? With some of the best public schools in the state and a low crime rate and a bunch of stuff for families to do, Lexington's considered the best place to raise a family in the Columbia area, at least according to one somewhat reputable source. They don't live lavishly here. They're just stable, have a good life. Good for you guys in Lexington. We're going to go back down to the coast again, where you might expect a lot of the rich snobs to live. This is James Island, which is on an island between Charleston and Folly Beach. A lot of this island is hanging Spanish moss, winding waterways, blooming flowers, and historic churches. It's really pretty. A lot of people say James Island's one of the most beautiful places to live in the whole state. To fit in with the 12,000 residents, you're going to need a well-padded wallet, well, at least respective to what others in this state make. Most households here bring in about $82,000 a year. Again, that's not bad, right? And you can live on an island with these people if you wanted to fork up about $425,000 for a house. While the cost of living here is lower than Charleston itself, people who live here tend to make more money annually than Charleston residents. And the unemployment rate here is only 1%. Good for you guys. Hard workers here in James Island, everyone. Give them a hand. People who live here say there's a strong sense of community on this little island and a good bit of pride. One resident stated that James Island is the real Charleston. It has a bunch of well-loved schools and a bunch of good restaurants and shops and a rich history and so much natural beauty. A lot of people say it has everything Charleston has and more. And it's much safer too. Now we're going to stay near the coast for our fifth richest city in the state of South Carolina. This is the town of Bluffton, just inland from Hilton Head. This town tends to attract residents who can already afford the high cost of living here. Hardly anybody here is out of work, and the average household brings in about $82,000. Again, that's not that much. There's kind of enough to do here, but you might be bored. There's not a lot of unique things to do or any exciting attractions, but it's close to Hilton Head and Savannah, and both of those places have a lot of things going on. The schools in Bluffton are well rated, and there's plenty of parks to attract young families, as long as they have the income to afford it. A home here is $400,000. A lot of people are like, $400,000, that's it? Yep, that's it. Ooh, you've heard of this place before. Now we're talking. We're right next door to Bluffton in Hilton Head. If you lived here, you'd be wearing a lot of flip-flops and sunscreen because HHI, as they call it, has no shortage of beaches and outdoor activities. While it may seem like most people you see on the island are just tourists, there's actually about 40,000 residents in Hilton Head. Many are golfers too. You may not know it, but there's 23 championship golf courses here. That's a lot. It takes a little bit more money to live on HHI than our previous cities. The average household brings in about $85,000 a year, and the median home is about $500K, well above the national average. The poverty rate here is below 10%. There's a bunch of good schools to pick from. And again, did I mention all the golf courses? There's a lot of golf courses here. But residents and tourists both like to complain about the traffic and the wait times at restaurants and businesses. I don't understand how tourists can complain about traffic. They're the problem. But with such a booming tourism industry, Hilton Head's never really calm. So if solitude's your thing, HHI probably isn't for you. Back to upstate we go. We're in Fort Mill, which is just right on the North Carolina border. It's actually considered a Charlotte suburb way up here. It's really nice all over this part of the state. There's a reason why people in Fort Mill have been coined Fort Millionaires. Folks here certainly aren't strangers to money. The cost of living in this area tends to be pricey. I mean, it's $450K for the average home. As one resident put it, if you don't have a detailed plan, you probably won't make enough money to survive in Fort Mill. Well, you gotta have a plan. That's basic knowledge, right? Even though the average house is only about $450K, a lot of the homes are a lot pricier, and prices of other goods tend to be inflated too, much like in nearby Tega. We'll talk about them later. But most folks tend to make it work. The average household brings in about $91K, and there's hardly any poverty here. The unemployment rate's about 3%. I mean, Charlotte's really close. If you don't have a job in Fort Mill, you're not trying. There's 17,000 people here, and a lot of people commute into Charlotte. It's about a 15-minute drive into Charlotte, so you could live here in Fort Mill and pay lower taxes and commute to work in Charlotte. Fort Mill has a lot of great schools. In fact, it supposedly has some of the best public schools in the state. Residents here get to enjoy the parks and the quaint shops and the restaurants and the old brick buildings. The area is growing quickly, though. A lot of people here complain about the constant construction. But they're probably new, too, so they have no room to complain, right? Who are the second richest people in the state of South Carolina? The people in Mount Pleasant might not be too happy to hear it, but it's them, because they're probably snobs. Mount Pleasant's a fancy town on the opposite side of Charleston from James Island. It's where a lot of the elite socialites that frequent downtown Charleston live. This densely populated burb of 87,000 people can only be afforded by those who bring home a rather hefty paycheck. I mean, the average family brings in over $100,000 a year, and that's necessary to afford a house that's about $650,000 on average. The cost of living's pricey, but most residents do pretty well, so they can afford it. Folks in Mount Pleasant have it made. There's pools and country clubs all over the place, and nice restaurants and bars where you can buy overpriced wine. Plus, you're super close to the beach. However, traffic is really bad around here, people. Who are the richest of all in the state of South Carolina? It's the people in Tega Cay. It's also in upstate South Carolina, just across the border from Charlotte. People say it's a picture-perfect movie-like depiction of suburbia, with crisp new homes, freshly mowed lawns, kids playing in the streets, and family-friendly barbecues. Aw, isn't that so special? Houses in Tega Cay are still kinda barely affordable at about $500,000 each, but families here bring in the most money of any other place in the state. The average take-home salary for mommy and daddy is over $130,000 a year. Plus, the poverty rate here is practically non-existent at 0.3%. So if you don't have a good job here, it's your own fault, people. Probably. Tega Cay is also a very safe place to live, and it has a bunch of A+ rated public schools. There's no shortage of parks, shopping centers, and sports facilities either. Sounds like Tega Cay's a slice of heaven, but residents do have a few complaints. Of course, they always do. People complain that stuff costs a lot in the store, and it's getting too crowded, and it's not really racially diverse. Well, you can't have everything, Tega Cay. You got it made up there. Stop your damn complaining. Okay, there you have it. The wealthiest cities in South Carolina. These places all have a high income level, low poverty, and some of the fanciest, most expensive homes in the state. And even though some of these places may not have the most exorbitant salaries, it's South Carolina. You can live a great life and not have to make a ton of moolah here. Now, if you're wondering about the poorest cities in South Carolina, or the most affordable, the list would include places like Abbeville, Lancaster, and Bennettsville. In Bennettsville, you can get a home for about 60 grand. Imagine that, people. These places would be at the bottom of the income ladder, though, and they're struggling with poverty and crime and unemployment. The average income levels here are borderline poverty at $27,000 a year for both mom and dad. The average home price in some of the poorest parts of South Carolina are going to set you back about $130K, in case you care. Again, cheap living, people. If you are so rich, if you aren't so rich, if you're just an average family guy, you can live right here, you can move right in with the place that's tucked into the pines. Are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. You can get my email in the description to find out how I can help you find your perfect relocation. And I can also help you find your new house, too. Email me and I'll work with you. I'm not just helping you figure out where to move, but I can help you find your perfect home, too. That's right. Someone's a realtor now. Who wants to deal with a realtor they don't know when you can have me help you, right? Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great. You should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more. You can also now buy my songs on iTunes and other formats. Click the link in the description. Thanks for watching. And remember, while we all might have different views, we should all be nice to each other and try to make the U.S. a better place in a positive way.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.